Oh, we're recording. Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our how to build was it clean web app? Fast web? Some kind of clickbait title about building a web app in React. Anyways, we're just going to go over some basics of what React.js is, why you would use it, and then we're going to build a shopping list app with React. And you're going to see that probably using React to build this shopping list app might be just the easiest way to do it compared to like HTML and CSS. So I put both of our names on here. I'm going to be going through mainly the presentation, and then Michael will be here to correct me and roast me when I say things incorrectly. So let's get started. Yeah, so as I said, on the outline today, what React is, why we use React, and how to create a shopping list app with React. Um, so first of all, because this might take a while, we want to install Node.js. And if you're not familiar, Node.js is like a runtime of JavaScript. So it's like a particular version of JavaScript, you could say. I guess it's a way to run JavaScript. And React is part of like the Node ecosystem. So you need Node to run React. And so can you guys see this? Yeah? Okay. So if you run like npm-v, you should be able to get something like this if you have npm installed. And npm is comes with Node as well. So if not, go ahead and go to the website and download it. Yeah. Okay, cool. So what is React? React is an open source library for building user interfaces. So why do we need it? If you went to the workshop yesterday about building portfolio websites, you might be familiar with like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. As he said, it's like the three types of files that you use to build a website. So why would you need anything else? Well, once you start building a bigger website, once you start making it really interactive with lots of like animations and buttons and different kinds of functions, you end up reusing a lot of the same code, and you end up like it gets really, really complicated. And so we've developers have come up with all these different ways to make the process easier, so that you can as easily as possible take your thoughts and translate them into the website. And so that's the purpose of most of these like UI user interface libraries. They allow you to build things more easily, more quickly, so you can get faster from your thoughts to a website. So we're going to see how that works today. So React is probably the most popular user interface library, and it's based on JavaScript, which is like the website that the language that all browsers know how to run. And it's maintained by Facebook and a lot of other companies that you're about to see, which is why it's really, really popular. And it's often used in hackathons. So personally, when I participate in hackathons, I like nowadays almost always use React just because it's so fast and I'm getting pretty fluent in it. And it's used as part of this tech stack here with MongoDB, Express, React, and Node. And React is just the front end. So it tells you like what to display. And then all the other stuff handles like the database is MongoDB. And then Node and Express handle like all the back end logic for like signing in users or doing calculations and all that sort of stuff. So that's what React is. And this is why React is important. It's used by all of these major companies: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Netflix, Instacart, Dropbox, Reddit, Lyft, and the list goes on and on and on. And you can look up online to see like what other companies do as well. So even though this is like super useful at hackathons, it's also applicable if you want to eventually get a job in industry somewhere. Knowing React is a really useful skill. So advantages of React. We kind of touched on this a little bit already, but why is React better than, so there are, I guess, two camps that could be coming to React. On one side, you have people who might be a little bit experienced with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, pure JavaScript. And you might have people who are experienced with other kinds of user interface frameworks. Well, some of the advantages of React compared to those are that, well, for one, it's really easy to learn. So hopefully we'll find that out today if I do a good job. Um, Second of all, declarative. This is a little bit hard to get at first, but basically it means you have to write a lot less code because you can just tell the computer exactly what you want it to do, rather than like getting into the details of the implementation. It's very abstract. And then component-based, which we'll see later on, that means that you can reuse code by defining them as components. So like if I have a button and I want it to have a bunch of particular styles, specific text inside, I can make a component and then I can use that button all over the place rather than like copying and pasting. Virtual DOM just means that if you're familiar with the way JavaScript edits websites, usually you edit the website directly, but virtual DOM means that in React, you edit like a virtual version of the website, and then it applies that virtual version to the website over and over again. And that just makes the code like cleaner because your logic is like really separate from your interface and it renders faster. Oh, and then this is my favorite part of it, packages. So like once you start using React, you save so much development time because you get to use all sorts of different packages. Like let's say you want to create an input for phone numbers. Like you could do all the coding yourself and write like a regular expression to make sure it's a valid phone number and all of that. Or you could get a React component and download it from online. And there's a huge library of all sorts of different components to help you save time. And finally, cross-platform. So React now has React Native, which allows you to use almost the same code base and create mobile apps in addition to your website. So if that's a possibility down the line, that's good to know. All right, so let's get into some coding. So hopefully this is the fun part. Hopefully everyone has Node installed by now. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to try to use React to build a shopping list. So we're going to set it up, create a user interface, and then use components and state. So you're going to see that steps 1 and 2 are just like very mechanical. And then steps 3 and 4 are where the magic of React really happens. So let's get started. So to set it up, the first thing you're going to do is run the command in the terminal, npx create React app shopping list. Oh, I said it's called to-do list. That's a typo. But you can go here to your terminal and let's say I already created the shopping list folder, but I can call it something else. So I can just run something like npx create React app, and then I can just type the name of what I want to call it. So if I wanted to call my project to-do list, it would create a folder called to-do list. I'm not going to run it right now because I already ran it, but once you're done, if you list out the files in that directory, you should see the folder you just created. So this might take a while, so I suggest you run this command right away. npx create React app shopping list. Oh, someone asked to repeat the advantages of React. The main advantages are that you get to reuse code instead of like copying and pasting it over and over again. And you get to manage the state of the app really easily. So if it's interactive, you have a very logical way of like keeping track of the state of the application, I guess.
Yeah, also it's just simple to set up and to build, and it's a lot easier to create dynamic pages. So if you want to like update your JavaScript, like reacting to an event, then yeah, it's pretty nice for that.
Yeah. Okay, so hopefully everyone's React apps have finished installing the boilerplate code. And then so after that, you should be able to go into the folder you just created. So what is called shopping list. I go in there and then I can see all of these files in there. I'm gonna go ahead and open it in Visual Studio Code. But before I explain this, we can show what it looks like. So in order to start a React app, you run the command either npm start or yarn start. And if this is NPM and Yarn are basically the same thing, and they're both package managers, which allow you to install packages from online for Node.js. And the difference is like not entirely clear, but most people like to use Yarn because it's not the default, which means it's better. So here we go. But NPM works just fine as well, and I use it often too. So what npm start or yarn start does is it opens on your localhost server. It starts serving your React files, and you can see it says like edit source/app.js and save to reload. So this is a pretty basic template website, but now if we look at the code, we can see what's actually going on here. So the main code for your app that gets displayed is in this file called app.js. And you can see this stuff in here looks pretty similar to HTML. So really, you can pretty much use regular HTML syntax. And the difference is that you have like slightly different syntax when it comes to these properties here for these elements. And we can get more into that later. But now we can try editing something in here. Let's say we said hello. Then if we go over here, it automatically refreshes and it says hello. So that's pretty cool. That's one of my favorite things about React. It automatically refreshes the page when you make changes, whereas in HTML, it just doesn't do that by default. And you could do a lot of work to set that up, but React just has it built in with Create React App. All this boilerplate code. So what's next? Let's go back here. Okay, so now we want to replace the contents of the app.js file we saw with some basic code. So we're going to get rid of all of that fancy like React branded stuff and then put in our own code. So we just, yeah, we don't need this logo anymore. And we can delete all of that. And now if we go, why do I have two browsers? Okay, if we go back here, then now you can see it's an empty page, which means we get to make whatever we want to. And that's the most fun part of coding. Okay. All right, so to explain the code, you can see, hopefully you all have the code. I think Michael sent the slides, so you can copy and paste it if you'd like to. So line 1 imports the CSS file. So you can go see in the same folder, there's also a CSS file with some basic styles, and you can add whatever you want there, any kinds of CSS rules you want. And then next up, there's a React component. And so the basic unit of displaying a user interface in React is the component. And the big app, the overall app is a component. And then within that, you can have like each paragraph is a component, each block of text. Wait, I just repeat myself. Each block of text is a component. Each section of the website can be a component. Basically, you can imagine everything's a component, and components are cool because number one, they're reusable, and number two, they have state. And so we're going to keep coming back to those two major points. So yeah, it's a regular JavaScript function with instructions to render something. So right now, it's rendering an empty div, which is a blank screen. But you can see that if we change it here, we can write any HTML we want to here. Well, it's actually not HTML. It's slightly modified HTML called JSX. But we're going to find out like what the difference is later on. So if you say like, I love hackTAMS here. Okay, I love hackTAMS. And then if we go back to the website, wow, it says I love hackTAMS. So the magic of web development. And then finally, this is the last and easiest to forget line, but it's very important. At the end of the file, you have to export the component. And exporting is something in JavaScript that allows other files to access specific functions or variables inside other files. So like source/index.js imports it. So like you have to have this export statement so that when you come to this file, you can import that component. And so when you get to more complicated projects and you create lots of different components, you can give each one a file. And then at the end of the file, you have to export it and then import it from another file. So that's that. Okay, so that's kind of the basics of like how a basic React project is structured. And now we're going to move on to actually starting to build our shopping list. So the first thing we're going to do is add a little heading. So what was the color I made it? Medium slate blue. Okay. And we can say shopping list. Okay, so this looks almost like HTML, but what is going on here? So if you've never seen React before, this might look a little bit strange. So if it's regular HTML syntax, it's probably something like h1 style equals, and then there's quotes, and it'll be like color, medium slate blue. But this is actually not HTML here. So that's wrong. This is JavaScript. And in JavaScript, in React, you pass in an object for the style of each element. So this is a JavaScript object. You can see you have a key of color and then a value of medium slate blue, which is a string. So this is code. And then because this is code, these outside braces signify that this inside thing is some kind of code. And later on, we're actually going to write a little bit of basic logic inside these inside braces. And you'll see that, yeah, it's actually JavaScript code. So that's what I'm explaining here. And then we're going to add our first little list item. So underneath here, we can create a little element. Honestly, why don't I just copy and paste it? So that's a lot of code. But when it comes down to it, this is really just two nested elements, two levels of nesting. So you have this unordered list, and then inside you're going to have list items for each of your shopping list items. So if you've seen HTML, this is probably pretty familiar. And the only difference so far with React is that instead of a string for style, we're using this like weird looking object syntax. Other than that, pretty normal, pretty simple. And then by now we have a basic looking website. It says 5 eggs. So that's cool. And then maybe you want to add like 2 more list items. So we can do that. Just copy and paste. And I can't really see the chat, so if there are any questions, like maybe, okay, good. So now it's 5 eggs. Maybe I can change it to something else. Someone say your favorite fruit.
Mango.
Mango. Okay, someone said mango. What's your favorite dairy product?
Milk.
Milk. All right. We'll take it. I'll say 1 gallon of milk. So that's my shopping list. Nice. Very healthy. And now if we go to look at what our website looks like, you have our 3 items. So there, last time I chose a tomato, which a tomato's a fruit, right? I'm not really sure, but now it has 3 items. So far we've created a project using Create React App, added a few list items, and then used inline styles to make the app look nice. But the code's really repetitive. I mean, you saw, right? Like there's so much messy stuff, especially with like the inline styles, and it's very repetitive. And then also like our shopping list doesn't work yet. It's not interactive. And so we're going to solve those 2 challenges in steps 3 and 4. So first of all, components. We're going to create a basic component called shopping item. Something like this is the structure. So we have our function app, and then we have our function shopping item. So look here, go to our code. Maybe we can make this a little bit bigger. Okay. Yeah, so components in React can either be simple variables, they can be functions, or they can be classes. And today we're just going to be doing functions because I like functions. But later on, I'll link to the React documentation where you can read all about like all the different kinds of components. But really, you can do everything you need to with functions. So here we have our shopping list function. Did I call it shopping? Should be shopping item. Yeah. So we're going to create a component for each item. So this is something common in React, which is when you notice a big block of code is duplicated, you don't want to keep copying and pasting it just to change like this one line of text. So instead, you can take something like this and then put it inside of your component. And here, instead of 1 gallon of milk, or let's keep it as 1 gallon of milk for now. We can do more later. And then in order to render the component, you just say shopping item. So that's something that's different from HTML. Finally, something that's different from HTML. In order to show a component, it's just like a regular HTML element, but you use the name of the component. So it's called shopping item, so I can call it shopping item here. And I can call this whatever I want to. And then now if I go to my preview, it says 1 gallon of milk. So exactly the same, except now the code is in a component. So if we keep going, now this is what we want our code to look like next. So here's where the magic of React starts to happen. So if we put here props.text, and then we put here text equals 1 gallon of milk. Then if we go to see what it looks like, well, it's exactly the same. But now you see, if I wanted to change the text here to 1 gallon of orange juice, oh, that's the wrong browser. It says 1 gallon of orange juice. And so now instead of having to copy and paste an entire large block of code, I can just copy and paste this one line and create 2 more elements. So I can put 5 eggs and 1 mango. And now the page looks the same, but the code is so much cleaner. And one thing I should explain here is props. So props is the properties passed into a React component. And you see like here, class name is a property passed into the div component. Style is a property passed into the h1 component. And then you can have custom ones as well. So custom props like text passed into the shopping item component. And then to access it, you can just say props.text. And so later on, I'm going to add more custom props here and then access them the exact same way. Okay. So now we have components, but what if we want to check items off of our to-do list? So this is where we want to make it reactive. And to make the app reactive, wow, I'm using React a lot. Reactive, interactive, we add state. So the way we're going to use state is by calling the function useState, surprisingly enough. So inside our app function, we can define this as shopping items and set shopping items. And we're going to create a list of objects. And then each object is going to have a text prop, like 5 eggs, let's say, and then a done prop to see whether it's done. So hopefully if you're familiar with basic JavaScript syntax, you know the square brackets create a list and the curly braces create an object. And so this is a list of objects, and each object has these key value pairs of text and the text that'll be stored in the item, and then done, and then a status to see whether it's checked off or not. So we can change this text and the theme of today is that we're going to make a whole lot of changes without changing anything about how it looks. But the code is much cleaner, and the single most important resource in a project is developer time. So the cleaner your code is, the better your project will be. All right, so we have and then don't forget, when you use state, you have to import useState from React. And useState is pretty self-explanatory, but it allows you to store this list of things as part of the state. So it's a variable that's associated with the component itself, and it's not going to disappear until you make the component disappear. And since app is like the top level component, it basically never disappears. It'll just be there as long as you're on the website until you refresh, and then it re-renders the component. So it stores shopping items as the list, and then set shopping items is a way to modify the list. So now we have this list created here, but it's not actually doing anything yet because we're not showing it. And so the only stuff that gets shown in your React app is the stuff that gets returned from your components. So right now we're using shopping item text equals and then putting the text there. But what if instead we did something like this? And this looks really fancy, but I'll explain it line by line. And then we can put in each of our properties here, or this would be item.text. So we pass in each of the properties from the object. What we're doing here is we're basically mapping this list into a bunch of different components. So hopefully you've seen this in JavaScript before, but if not, a map is just a way to take all the items in a list, and then for each one, you take the item and then you return a different item based on that. So it's useful if it's used really commonly in React because we want to store data in a simple way that just stores the data we need and then separate that out from the actual component we want to render. All right. I think that's all for this component then. Oh, and I should also talk about this sorting statement. So sort is also another function in JavaScript, and it allows you to sort an array based on a sorting function. And we take in two elements and determine which one's greater. So if the number you get, you perform like some kind of operation to get a number. If the number is greater than 0, that means that the first one is greater. The first item is greater. And if it's less than 0, that means that the second item is greater. I hope I got that right. And then at the end, it sorts it in ascending order, which means the zeros will be at the top and then the ones will be at the bottom. And these Boolean values over here get converted into zeros and ones. So for example, let's say like 1 was true and 2 was false. Then it would say this is A. Let's say this one is A and this one is B. So it would do A.done minus B.done, right? So A.done is this one, which is true, and that gets converted to a 1. And then B.done is false. That gets converted to a 0. And then so if you do 1 minus 0, you get 1. And since that's greater than 0, that means that A is greater than B. And because A is greater than B, it gets moved below B. And then we compare. Then when this is the second item, we compare this to this. And you can see the same thing happens. And then all the done items get moved to the bottom. Okay. But it doesn't quite work yet, because what is this toggle done thing? So the next thing we're going to do is define what toggle done actually is. So this is probably the most complicated segment of code we're going to write today, I think. So const toggle done equals index. So we define this function called toggle done, and then inside it, first, we're going to make a copy of the shopping items. So we just create a new list with the spread operator, the ... That makes a copy of it. And then the item at the index we want, we're going to set whatever its done value is to the opposite of its current done value. So we say not. So if it's true, it turns to false. If it's false, it turns to true. And then at the end, we want to set our shopping items to be whatever we just did. So now we can, I think, check off items, but it's not actually doing anything because it doesn't change the way the component is rendered. So that's our toggle done function. So now we can add these few style props to make sure that when we click, it actually changes the way the user interface looks. And so if you went to Michael's workshop, you know that when you click things, stuff should happen. So we want stuff to happen. So the first thing we're going to do is we want to fill in the circles. So inside the style of the div, we just want to add a background property, and we want to say if this item is done, you want the background to be medium slate blue. Otherwise, you don't want a background because it's an empty circle. I think I forgot a comma over on the right side. Oh, okay. And then the other thing we want to do is if it's done, we want to return a strike through the element. Otherwise, we just return the props.text. So now if we go look at it, then it should be, okay, wait, I think I forgot the most important part, which is on click. Yeah. So if you've done like regular HTML before, you're probably already familiar with onClick. And in React, it does pretty much exactly the same thing, except that you have a capital C here, because that's the way React syntax works. So onClick, props.toggleDone. And so now you see like how props works. You pass in a property here, and then you access it here. Or you can pass it in here, and then access it here. So here we're passing in a function, and we call this function whenever the item is clicked. So, oh, toggle done is not defined. Does anyone know what happened? Wait, let's see. Oh, I just opened the wrong app. Okay, so now if you click the items, wow, it can strike through them. And that's about it. So we created a project using Create React App, added a few list items, used some inline styles to make the app look nice. And then we started the React magic by converting the code to use components and then using a state variable to make the list interactive. So if this makes absolutely zero sense, that's totally okay. I think like the first time I learned React, like I had no idea what was going on. And I probably used it at least 2 or 3 hackathons before I figured out like why React is so great. But now I use it for almost everything. So to wrap up, first of all, we're gonna go through some ideas to make more features. So like if you want to add more items to your shopping list, you could try that. You could implement a function to delete items or make a button to print out the items. All of these things. I think the first one especially is really useful and going to teach you a lot about React. And if you need help with that, feel free to ping me on Discord at some point and I can help. All right, so finally, to learn more about React, go to react.js.org, which has the definitive source for all documentation and instructions related to doing anything at all in React. And then second to that is Stack Overflow, which will solve all of your problems if you just look up the right problem. And the slides will be at the hackTAMS website, hacktams.org/React Workshop. And then if you didn't get all the code that I wrote during that time, you can find it at this link, which you can go find in the slides later on as well. So the final tip I want to leave you with is just try building things on your own. I think React at first it seems very complicated compared to HTML, CSS, but once you get into it and start building things, you learn that it's really actually a lot simpler to write code in React than to write code in HTML, CSS, JavaScript, especially once you get to really complicated projects. And the best way to do it is just by forcing yourself to do it. And so I highly recommend you just like next time you try building something, try using React. Or if you're already familiar with React, try using a new framework that you've never used before. And that's kind of the cool thing about hackathons, because you get to try something new. So that's all for the workshop. Does anyone have any questions? No questions? Either that means I did a really good job of explaining or no one understood it.
I think you did a really good job, like, because usually this is something I struggle with because I don't know how to use it at all, and so this made it really easier for me.
That's good to hear. All right. Yeah, thank you all for showing up. It's been cool. I'm going to stop screen sharing.